Okay, so if Reagan was here today, he'd say, what the hell has happened to his country, right? So here's the takeaway today. We have all been working together all year. And there's two takeaways with this. Number one, we've got to start the path of fiscal sanity. And we're going to do everything we can to start that path. Everybody up here, we'd like to have a balanced budget. Every one of us. We know that's what you have to do. But we're willing to work with everybody else to start the path. And if whether whoever it is, Republican or Democrat in the Senate and the House, doesn't want to do that, we're going to fight like hell to change that. Number two, we are going to secure the border. Nothing's going to get passed with regard to Ukraine unless this border is going to be secure. And it's going to be clear. It's not going to be, oh, we tried, we passed some BS that doesn't do anything. It will only happen if we have real border security to pass. So the two big things on top of FISA. But this group, we're going to keep working, and we're going to work together, which is in contrast to when I first came up here where House and Senate didn't work together. We're going to work together to make sure these things happen. So any of us can take any questions.
Questions? Stay here. Go ahead, sir.
I've kind of a detailed question. You talked about the 1.59 trillion. I feel at one point you guys were pushing 1.47. Are you guys coming up in your number to make it?
Well, look, like I said in my remarks in the beginning, 159 is too expensive for many of us, but we realize that 147 is not going to happen. But my goodness, the House overwhelmingly supported this 159, and so did the Senate. And so the fact that just a few months later, they're already willing to just go beyond that like it doesn't exist is absurd. It is too much, but that has to be the limit, and it's 159 actual programmatic spending. It's not 159 plus rescissions and chimps and all that other stuff. 159's it.
And if there's any supplemental funding, it will be paid for. Just like what they did, you might talk about that. Just like what they passed in the House with regard to Israel, it was paid for. And there's a lot of things. You got IRS funding, you got this slush fund of what, $400 billion for Green New Deal stuff. There's plenty of money to be cut. Ma'am.
It sounds like during Speaker Johnson's lunch on this side of the building, he talked about what could happen with a continuing resolution. And it sounds like, please correct me if I'm wrong, Senator, he said that he would do a full year CR if they couldn't get appropriations bills done by February 2nd. Is that what your understanding was? And for the House folks, how does that sound to you guys? Okay.
Number one, the goal is to get this done. The goal is to have Schumer start doing his job. What we ought to do, the House is doing their job. They're passing spending bills. We ought to be doing the same thing here. I don't know when was it last time we passed it? Was it sometime middle of October is last time we even talked about spending over here. The House has passed a variety of things. Why aren't we bringing them up? This is all Schumer trying to get this big omnibus where he and a few others get to decide what's in it. And that's not going to happen this year.
Yeah, I'll just add that I wasn't over in the Senate lunch, but to the extent that the Speaker was talking about a full year CR, I think there's a pretty good article in was it Roll Call this morning or yesterday, walking through the implications of that, right? And what you talk about, if you actually adhere to the caps that were passed in Memorial Day weekend, that those caps would truly set spending probably in the mid 1.5s, right? If you actually follow that. And or if you apply the sequester, right, it would drop those numbers down. So the point here is we want spending level to be 1.59 or lower. But if we're going to talk about setting a top line spending level for moving the appropriations bills, which is our goal because the American people expect us to do our job, we've passed 7. I think there's probably at least 3 or 4 others we could probably pass out of the House, get to conference. Let's go work it through at a spending level at 1.59 or lower. That's what we're saying. Let's do our job. And I think what the Speaker is saying is that if the Senate won't work with us to do that, then the default position is going to put it at a pretty aggressive cut into the 1.5s if the Senate is unwilling to do their job and do what we did in the House.
Congressman Roy, can you clarify what you said earlier about the NDAA? Would you not support passing the NDAA if there's not a deal on border security to lower the number of migrants coming across the border? And is there money for authorization for Ukraine that you find problematic in the NDAA?
First of all, what I said explicitly, and I think reflects at least most of the feeling of the folks on the stage, and I'll let them speak for themselves, is that for the United States House or Senate to move forward with anything additional for Ukraine without having, as Senator Scott articulated, without having done our job to secure the border of the United States in the form of H.R. 2 and the metrics that Senator Johnson walked you through, that would be not just a mistake, but it should be dead on arrival. We should not do that. And that's our message, and we're being very clear about that. The NDAA, we should actually be going to conference and doing the work we're supposed to do rather than four corners conversations and deals to jam through a watered down NDAA with a short-term extension of FISA on the back of it, which is what is being talked about. That shouldn't be the case. We didn't come here, we didn't change the rules in January, we didn't have the fights we've had this year to go back to four corner deals negotiating, to jam through bad legislation the American people don't want, that doesn't reform our military to focus on its mission rather than social engineering, that doesn't make us do our job with respect to protecting the rights of American citizens through FISA, rather than jamming it all through as this town wants to do.
I think first off, we're all fed up. We're all fed up of four people making these decisions. We're fed up with, somebody just comes into lunch and gives us our orders, and that's what we're supposed to do. And I think on their side, we're fed up. They're fed up with it, what happened over there, and we're fed up with it.
Yeah, as a NDAA conferee, I'm still waiting for the invitation to the conference. I'm waiting for it at this moment. So until I see it, I won't be signing anything, sir.
You said earlier that the House would be closed for business for any supplemental that's not for Israel. Does that mean that you would not be for leveraging a Ukraine?
Let me just clarify this. We're not going to countenance in the House of Representatives this omnibus supplemental that includes Ukraine and alleged more money for the border to process migrants illegally into our country, and then throw Israel on it as the sweetener to try and force everybody to vote for it. That's dead on arrival in the House. It's not going to happen. We're not going to allow it to happen.
Wait,
Yes, ma'am.
The speaker suggested that it would be Ukraine paired with border and Israel stand alone.
Israel, they all need to stand alone because they all deserve their own debate. But most importantly, two things: the American citizens can't afford their own government. They can't afford their own bills right now. So if anything's going to happen, it has to be paid for. And the American citizens demands to know how their member voted on each one. Not, well, I only voted for this Ukraine thing because Israel was in it and I had to vote for Israel. The American people are sick of that. Let them stand on the merits of their own weight, and we'll see where the votes are.
Let me add one thing about the Ukraine border. So just to be clear about what we're talking about, you read in the Wall Street Journal today, and if you're talking to your typical kind of Senate leadership and gossip around town folks, what they're doing is trying to package together Ukraine with mountains of spending, which virtually all of my constituents strongly oppose no matter what, and then pile on top of that watered down border security with no metrics. That's dead on arrival. That cannot be an option. The American people didn't send us here for that. So if that's what people are talking about, that's a no-go. If what we're talking about instead is the president signs H.R. 2 and we have metrics tied to something on Ukraine, then we'll have a conversation with a full-throated debate on the floor of the House. But we should not be talking about watering down and negotiating against ourselves when the American people don't even want us to give another dollar to Ukraine, particularly when our border is wide open, Americans are dying, we're under assault, our hospitals are overrun, our police are overrun, our kids are dying from fentanyl poisonings, and they want us to have more money for Ukraine?
One more.
Let me make this just real simple on the border. There's going to be one of two things that happen by next November. We're either going to secure the border or we're not going to secure it. The Biden open border policy is going to continue. I think what we're saying is we don't want and we will not allow, to the best of our ability, any Republican fingerprints on anything that's going to keep the border open. We want to be part of the solution. By the way, that would be a huge favor to Democrats and Biden. We're not playing politics here. This would be actually detrimental politically to us. If we help Biden and force him to actually secure the border, that would fix one of the problems that the American people don't like his administration for. So we are about actually securing the border, and nothing less than that. We want nothing to do, and we're going to do everything we can to block that.
Last question. Yes, ma'am.
Oh my gosh, so many questions, but I'll try and answer.
Well, you can ask members afterwards.
I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying right now. Chairman of the Freedom Caucus, you are saying that you will not accept any combination of any of these three items. Ukraine, Israel, and border all need to move separately?
Yeah, you got it. It's pretty simple, right?
All right. And now, here's my question to you. I understand your H.R. 2 push. That is not going to pass the Senate. We know that. We know the president's not going to sign it. I know. I'm sorry. Anything's possible, sure. But what do you think about the perfect being the enemy of the good here? This is the only moment you may have in the next year to actually change any policy on the border. Are you concerned about pushing for something that doesn't have a real chance when you could get a change in asylum or parole?
But I would just remind, and I think my colleagues, they can speak for themselves. We already have laws on the books right now that were enforced just 3 years ago that had the numbers dramatically lower. Most people considered the border to be secure. No, it doesn't matter what we pass here in the way of legislation, even if it gets a signature, if we don't have a president and administration willing to enforce the law. And that's what we have right now. So we need to see definable, verifiable, certifiable, believable metrics that show it's actually secure. Otherwise, it's all just more failure theater up here. It's more failure theater, and we're done with the failure theater. The American people, more importantly, are done with the failure theater.
We have a lawless administration. That's all let's acknowledge. We have an administration that doesn't care what the law is, and so if we don't have metrics, nothing's going to change. They're lawless.
Right. Thank you all very much. Stick around a little bit and answer some of your questions.
Thanks for coming.